What's up, everybody? Welcome to the first Get Paid for Your Pad podcast in 2023. Hope you enjoyed the holidays, Christmas, New Year's. I am personally in the Netherlands right now. I'm at my mom's house. I've celebrated holidays with my family here. Kind of really disconnected. So you may have noticed I missed a couple podcasts in the last week or so. But yeah, this is the first podcast of 2023. Normally, I record this with Eric on the Friday, but with the time zone difference and the holidays, it was a little hard to coordinate that. So I decided to do a solo podcast. And the goal for today is to really give you guys an overview of my favorite podcasts of 2022, but also the most popular podcasts. I've noticed a lot of we got a lot of new listeners in the last year. I'll share some stats with you guys in a second here, but yeah, a lot of new listeners. Like they always reach out and they ask me like, hey, I see I just started listening. I see you have like 500 podcasts. Like I don't have time to listen to all of them. Like, can you give me some of your favorites? So what I did is I've actually composed a list. I went through all the podcasts of 2022, and I created a couple different categories. And those are, number one, the top three most downloaded, so the most popular podcasts, if you will. Category number two, innovative. Number three, inspirational tools and services, and actionable tips. So those are the five categories that I created. And in those categories, I selected three podcasts that are my favorite in those categories. And the whole idea is, we're starting off 2023. Obviously, we wanna start the year off strong. We want to set some goals. We want to make some plans. And so I figured by sharing these podcasts with you, you might get some inspiration to try a new strategy or use a new service or a new technology tool or implement some actionable tips that maybe you missed a couple podcasts in 2022, or maybe you did listen to these podcasts but you didn't take any action on them, or maybe you're a new listener and you haven't listened to these podcasts yet. So goal is really to kind of inspire you and point you towards the podcasts that I think are going to be really helpful for you to make 2023 the best year in your short-term rental business yet. So before I go into it, just some quick stats. 2022 was a record-breaking year for the podcast. Actually, we recorded 99 episodes. As you know, we do 2 a week. Sometimes we miss one, so like 52 weeks, that would be like 104. So we missed 5 episodes, which is not bad. 99 episodes, that's a record. Actually, I've never recorded more than 99 podcasts in 1 year, and obviously the goal for 2023 is to record at least 100. But the downloads is where it really kind of blew the lid off the record of the amount of downloads. I think my yearly record for downloads was somewhere between 250 and 300,000. And in 2022, we had 624,459 downloads, according to my podcast host. So that's a huge record, which I'm super excited about. It shows that more and more people are listening to this podcast, which obviously I love seeing that. And shout out for everybody who has recently started listening. Again, this podcast is specifically useful for you because you might have not listened to the podcast that I am going to go through on today's podcast. So with that said, let's dive into the first category, the top 3 most downloaded podcasts of 2023. Number 1, with a pretty big distance, is the podcast that I recorded with Mr. David Bergman. It is episode number 522, and the title is From 25 to 100 STR Units in Less Than 1.5 Years. This podcast, I also selected this podcast for the category inspiration, because honestly, like, sometimes we get a student in Legends X, and then after they finish the program, a year later we'll talk to that person and suddenly like his business completely changed, right? And that was the case for David, who when he came to us he had 25 units and now he's over 100. So very, very inspirational story. So if your goal is to get to that level, which I know like not everybody has that goal, but if you do have that goal, then I highly recommend listening to this podcast episode 521. And some takeaways that I got from interviewing David is, I always like to ask like, what are the top learning lessons, going through a journey like that. And a couple takeaways from him is he mentioned number one, it's absolutely crucial to learn how to say no, especially when it comes to management clients, right? You really want to make sure that you only work with the clients, with the property owners that you want to work with, right? That have the same values, that are not going to look over your shoulder and and kind of trying to micromanage you, because it's not scalable, right? So that was the number one takeaway. Number two takeaway was when we build systems, as we start scaling, we have to build systems, right? And David was very, very focused on continuously adjusting the systems that weren't working quickly in order to improve them, to really turn his business into a machine. So I thought that was a really good takeaways. When I first started building systems, and when I say systems, I really mean like standard operating procedures. My mindset was like, oh, let's create the system, and then that's it. Then we're done. But that's not the case. We have to constantly test and see where it breaks down and improve it. So that's the second takeaway. And then number three is he said, invest in team members before you need them, and hire the right people. I think that's something we talked about a lot, Eric and I, in 2022. Is how do you hire the right team members? But David's point is really powerful, because a challenge that we often run into is that we start looking for a team member, whether that's a virtual assistant or whether that's an operational manager or maintenance person, whatever it is. We typically start looking for that person when we have a really strong need. And the problem with that is, at that point, when we're already like kind of overwhelmed with something, then we need to invest time to find the right person. But if we're already overwhelmed, it's hard to find that time. So then what happens is we just kind of look around us and grab the first person that kind of is available, because we want to solve this problem fast, right? And then what typically happens is we have to let go of that person after a few months, because we recognize like, okay, this wasn't the right fit. We didn't really spend the time to really get clear on like, who are we looking for, what type of person are we looking for, the skill sets, the experience, all of that. So those are the top three lessons that I want to share from the interview with David. Number two most downloaded is episode number 446, the hottest places to invest in properties for the short-term rental market in 2022. So this is a podcast where with my guest Marcus Rader, actually the CEO of Hostaway and a very active short-term rental investor. I don't know how relevant that podcast is right now, to be honest, because obviously we're talking about 2022. Might still be interesting if you are looking to invest in short-term rentals. Might still be interesting to listen to that podcast and just kind of see what Marcus's thoughts were, because he's a pretty smart guy and he has some really good insights. So number three most downloaded in 2022 is episode number 455, how to dominate your short-term rental market. This is an interview I did with one of our master STR Legends mastermind members. His name is Tim Mortimer. He's from Australia, and he built a really, really amazing company called B&B Made Easy. And he also have a booking platform called Book Orange. And he's absolutely crushed his market. He's absolutely just become the number one person, number one operator in his market. And I would say the number one takeaway that I got from interviewing him is Tim has a very, very strong focus on creating a strong company culture, developing his core values, something that we also teach in Let's X. He has like posters on the walls with his core values, and and really drives the culture in his company. Um, and he does fun things as well, where he like every month he'll take his team out for lunch and give somebody a prize, somebody who really lived up to the core values in his company. So as a result, like everybody knows how to make decisions in his business because everybody is very aware of what the core values are. So he doesn't have to explain to his team members all the time like, hey, this is how you make that decision, this is how you make this decision, because the team members have learned through the culture to understand how to make decisions in the company, right? So I think that's really, really powerful. Obviously, especially if you wanna grow your business. But even if you have a smaller business, like I always feel like core values are really good to. It's always good, useful time spent to think about core values, even if you just have one listing, because most people don't really know their personal core values, right? And that's something that's really useful to think about. Is what's actually important to you, even if you're not using it for your business. It can give you some clarity for your personal life. So those are the three most downloaded podcasts in 2022. The next category is innovation. The reason I chose this category is because every year we see the number of hosts who are doing something that's kind of outside of the box and they're having success with it. And so I put this category here for you to be inspired, and if you want to try something new, this is the right this is here's some things that you could do, right? So number one is episode number 511, how to leverage the film industry to fill your Airbnbs, right? And I've specifically chosen podcasts in the innovation category that can help you get more bookings, because I've noticed bookings have slowed down in some markets, and I don't know if 2023 is going to be as good as the last 2 years. Um, but I've noticed that a lot of people are looking for like alternative ways to fill their Airbnbs, because Airbnb is not always giving you enough demand to get your occupancy up to like 60 to 80%. So here's a few ways that you can do that. Number one is the film industry is very interesting. Not a lot of people talk about this, but I interviewed one of our legends, ex-student Laura Wagner. She's the founder of the Sweet Life Whistler, out of Vancouver, British Columbia, and she's a performer, professional actor, and advocate for the film industry. So she knows all about like movie production and that whole industry, right? And she actually shared a very simple way where you could put your Airbnb on the radar, with local film crews to actually rent out your property and shoot some scenes at your property. So she shared some very actionable tips how you can literally just go on Google and search for um, your local film organization, or local film commission, I guess is what they call it. And oftentimes you can literally just submit your property, and then there's a chance that they might see it and they might contact you. So it's a pretty low hanging fruit in terms of the amount of effort that you have to put in, and it could be a pretty hefty payoff, because those film companies, they are willing to pay quite high daily rates, much higher than what you get on Airbnb, right? So you might be able to hit the jackpot there. So that's the first episode in innovation, number 511, how to leverage the film industry to fill your Airbnbs. Number two is podcast number 506. And in this podcast, I talked to Jackie Nidin. She's the CEO of PHX Stays in Arizona. And she actually I think she listened to an episode that I did with a company called Peerspace. Peerspace is basically the Airbnb for um, activities, or like film, like a photo shoot, or like a workshop, or any type of activities where people might need a space during the day. And that's what makes peer space really interesting, because it's not a night, it's not an over, you don't get stays for overnight bookings. You actually can connect with people that want to rent out your space during the day. And again, this platform is pretty new, so there's not going to be a ton of demand in every market, but it's worth checking it out. If you're struggling with bookings, it's worth checking out and seeing if there's some demand for your place during the day. It's free to create a profile on Peerspace, and Jackie saw some pretty awesome success. She was actually able to rent out one of her units, and she made $1,740 in one day, versus her normal daily rate on Airbnb is something like $300. Another interesting aspect of this platform is that people generally are looking for weekdays for these type of rentals, which is nice because oftentimes weekdays are the hardest to rent out on Airbnb and VRBO and such. So if you're looking for to fill up especially the weekdays, fill the occupancy on the weekdays, then Peerspace might be a good place to go. All right, number 3 in the category innovation is how to fill your Airbnbs with corporate travelers. Episode number 523. I talked to Robert Nunez, who has been on the podcast before. He actually had a really cool co-living villa in Aruba, one of the Caribbean islands. And I actually stayed with him for New Year's 2020, I think it was. But Robert is a really powerful person. He's very successful, and he talks about how to focus on corporate travelers for your short-term rentals. There's a lot of advantages there, because corporate travelers are very high quality guests. They typically are able to pay a higher rate for units, but obviously, you have to do some marketing in order to attract these travelers. So Robert goes through a number of things to do, a number of tips and action items where you might be able to find these corporate travelers and fill up your Airbnbs that way. So if that sounds interesting to you, then go check it out. Episode 523. The next category is inspirational. So these are inspirational stories from people that I've interviewed, people that have inspired me, and hopefully can inspire you as well. I already mentioned the first one because that was the most downloaded one from 2022, episode number 521 with David Bergman. The second one in the inspirational category is episode number 490. The title is From Hectic Host to Legend in Less Than 1 Year. If you guys are not familiar with those terms, hectic host and legends, Eric and I created a sort of a roadmap for hosts. The first stage is a traditional host, and we have the side hustle host, the hectic host, the rising star, and the legends. Those are kind of like the 5 stages that we defined that we see that every host is in or is going through as they grow their business. So our goal with our Legends X program is really to help the hectic host to become either a rising star or a legend. And if you're interested in learning about that, you can just literally Google the 5 stages of hosting, and you'll find some podcast episodes where we talk more in detail about that. But essentially, Thomas Barry, he came to us, went through our Legends X program, and then he joined our SDR Legends Mastermind, literally I think 3 to 6 months after he graduated from his class. And he is absolutely crushing it. Thomas is what I would like to describe as the perfect student. Somebody who comes in with a positive mindset, with a mindset of abundance. He sees the opportunity and he is willing to just go 110% in, take all the advice, show up for all the calls, do all the homework. And as a result, his business has completely exploded. He's doing over $1 million. He's onboarding new properties all the time. He's grown. At the time of the podcast, he grew to close to 20 very high-end, unique luxury properties. I think he started off with just under 10 or so. Um, but yeah, like amazing person, amazing person to be inspired from. So if you're interested in uh, Thomas's journey, then go to episode number 490. The last podcast in this category is episode number 513, how to build your short-term rental business through fundraising. So this is interesting because the host that I interview here, let me see, his name is Daniel Kalinov, and he's the chief investment officer at Diversus, which is a boutique private equity firm that invests in luxury hospitality and affordable housing. There's a couple of things that I thought was really inspiring. Number one is that Daniel is really focusing on the one hand, of building his business in with luxury units, and obviously like making money and building the business, but at the same time he's also focused on investing in affordable housing, right? So he also wants to do something good for the community, which I think is amazing. And he honestly, like, he's absolutely crushed it, and he has an interesting model where he's basically started a private equity fund to raise money to invest into short-term rentals, versus the management model where you're managing other people's homes, or the rental arbitrage where you're leasing the properties and renting and re-renting them Airbnb. So it's pretty unique, I think, his story. And what's cool as well is Daniel's actually developing two really cool boutique hotel projects out in Belize, which is a small country just south of Mexico in Central America. So amazing, amazing achievements, incredible person, and very inspiring. So episode number 513, how to build your short-term rental business through fundraising. All right, let's go to category number 4, tools and services. So, as you know, there is a plethora. I don't know if I pronounce this word right, but plethora or plethora, whatever it is, basically a lot of tools and services that exist in the short-term rental space these days that can help you, automate your business, and all sorts of services that are out there to help you grow and streamline. So um, this year in 2000, or last year 2022, I've gone through all the episodes, and to kind of see like which were like the tools and services that are new, that I think are very interesting, and a little bit innovative as well. I didn't want to just go for the 10th dynamic pricing app, or the 567th PMS that came out. I really wanted to choose some some tools and services that are more unique, and that we haven't seen in the marketplace. So first off, episode number 504, I talked to Minoan and how to uplevel the experience for your guests. Minoan is a very interesting platform that you can use to do multiple things. I'm just putting up the episode right here. I talked to the founder, actually, Mark Hostovsky, and Minoan is a platform where hosts can purchase furniture and amenities at a 30 to 60% discount, and then also make those items shoppable for your guests and actually earn a commission. So there's really two sides of this platform. On the one hand, they you can basically, they made deals with all the big suppliers of furniture and all sorts of amenities that you might need for your Airbnb. And so instead of like going to a shop individually, you're taking advantage of the bulk buying power that Minoan has, and that can lend you a pretty big discount. But then on top of that, you can literally display these items obviously in your Airbnbs, and then you can use an app where your guests can actually buy the items if they're interested in it. And I guess the biggest takeaway that I got from this podcast is that when it comes to marketing, like, when you experience something like in your life, that's actually the most important touch point that you have with a certain brand, right? And so it makes a lot of sense for us to actually market the things that we have in our Airbnbs because of that, right? So if you watch TV or something, you see an ad of a certain brand, that's a much smaller touch point than if you're actually experiencing it. So it makes it made a lot of sense to me. I never really had that perspective. So I felt that was really interesting. So let's see. Let's go to. So that was episode 504. Minoan. Yeah, you might have heard of them because they talking about marketing. They've been marketing their platform pretty heavily. So you might have heard about them somewhere else. Episode 444. So triple four. Get funding to grow your Airbnb portfolio with My Nectar. So My Nectar is another really interesting new service or service I would say that can actually help Airbnb hosts to invest in either improvements of the Airbnbs or even invest in a brand new Airbnb by essentially giving you cash on the back of your future income. So basically, the way it works is they look at your experience as a short-term rental host. They look at the unit that you're running, and they will buy a portion of your future cash flow and give you the cash up front. Obviously, you're going to be paying an interest rate on that. But basically, the way it works is you get a lump sum of money, and then for a certain period, you're going to be paying them off by paying them a percentage of your monthly revenue. So I thought that was a pretty interesting a pretty interesting service. There's some services out there that's somewhat similar, like Host Financial is another one that comes to mind, but they have a slightly different model. So I really think that My Nectar is the first one, the first company to really model financing in a very creative way, and the Nectar team is awesome. We I've became pretty good friends with them. They've also joined our mastermind, so we talk to them quite a bit. And they're just really awesome people who really want to help the short-term rental industry and want to help short-term rental hosts to uh, to get some access to financing. So oftentimes it's hard to get access to financing. If you can't get a mortgage, you don't have great relationships with a local bank. Then it's and you don't have like really rich family members or friends, and it's hard to find funding sometimes. And Nectar could be a solution if you're in need for some cash to invest into your business. So that is the second one in the category tools and services. Number 3, and that was episode 444. Number 3 is episode number 482, best practices for working with influencers to market your Airbnbs. This is an interview I did at early, sort of mid 2022 with Jordan Kahana, and he's the co-founder of Stay Ammo, which is a platform that connects short-term rental hosts with social media influencers. Right. So you might think, why would I want to host a social media influencer? Well, the reason is it's basically there's two reasons why you might want to do that. Number one is social media influencers, like people basically have followings on Instagram and YouTube and platforms like that. They are generally pretty good photographers. And so what you could do is you could invite an influencer to stay for free at your Airbnb or stay at a discounted rate. And then in exchange for some really cool photos, but also in exchange for some exposure, right? These social media influencers, they have followings, right? And if your guest avatar kind of matches their typical follower, then it could be very beneficial for them to, share stories and post pictures of your units on their channels to get some more bookings, get some more. It's basically a marketing tool. Obviously, there's no guarantee that you're gonna get a result from that. But if you, especially for like weekdays, if your units are, let's say, like 60-70% booked typically year round, the days that you're not hosting guests, like you're not making any money anyway. So it might be a good idea to use those days to host some influencers, get some high quality photos that you can use in your marketing, but then also get some exposure for your listings and get some more bookings that way, right? So that's the third episode in this category, tools and services, episode 482. best practices for working with influencers to market your Airbnbs. And the website is stayamo.com. All right, we are at the last category, actionable tips. So this category is really meant for for people who are looking to take some action this early 2023. We're excited. We have all these, new what you call them. I forgot the name. Like when you promise you do something. I saw a really funny meme of somebody New Year's revolutions or something. It's called. And I saw a meme that says 2024, and then you see a person drinking a glass of alcohol and saying like 2024 is really going to be the year where I stick to my resolution. So I thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, actionable tips. Episode number 502. How to fill your calendar with direct bookings is the first one that I selected. In this episode, number 502, I chat with the one and only Mr. Mark Simpson, founder of Boostly, which is Mark is basically the direct booking expert in our industry. We are very good friends with him. He's definitely like one of my favorite experts in the industry. He has a really funny English accent to start out with, but also he knows everything about direct booking. So on this podcast we talk about how to modify, how to get people to book with you direct, how to have some little clues on your Airbnb listings on how people might find your direct booking website, why it's so important to not rely on the OTAs, right, like Airbnb, and also the biggest mistakes that hosts make when they start with direct bookings. So direct bookings is a focus of yours in 2023, and I highly recommend check out episode 502 with Mr. Mark Simpson. Number 2 is actually one of our own trainings that we've made available to the community this year, episode number 487, where Eric and I talk about a free workshop that we have created to help you essentially scale your Airbnb business. But what we really focus on is like the kind of work that most hosts kind of overlook. When people think about scaling, they always think about, all right, I got to go out there and get more listings, right? And oftentimes they kind of forget that there's a couple of things that you want to do before you do that, because building any business, it's a long journey, and it's a difficult journey, and there's going to be a lot of challenges. So before you even start building that, you got to do a number of things to just get really clear on. Number one is like, what do you really want to build? Do you want to build something that you want to sell in 3 years, or do you want to build something that you can pass on to your grandchildren, or do you want to build something where you're just kind of supporting, you're able to support yourself and with a reasonable income, but you're not really shooting for, you're not trying to be a millionaire or something, but you just want to like have some freedom and just be able to travel, and kind of have a smaller business just kind of run on autopilot, so that you can spend time with your family or your children. So there's different types of businesses, and so before you jump into it and start like trying to grow it, it's really important that you think about that first. Also, you want to think about how much money do you really want to make, right? So it's something that we call your financial freedom number, right? And that's part of the workshop. And I'll tell you how to get access to that in a minute, because we still have it out there, and it's free. So no real downside of jumping into that. But yeah, your financial freedom number is we basically created a process to figure out like how much money, what does financial freedom really mean to you? Because a lot of people, they want to be financially free, but they don't really know what it means, right? So we created a process where you can literally like figure out like what's that number that I want to get to, where I would consider myself financially free. Because that number is actually, what's really interesting is that number is very different from person to person, but also what we noticed all of our students went through this training, what we noticed that a lot of people, they thought they had a very different idea of what financial freedom means. than after they did the exercise. So it can be quite insightful. And then the third part of this training is figuring out really what we call your I host statement, which is basically your guest avatar. What type of properties do you want to go for? What market do you want to be in? Now, these are all the important questions that we recommend you ask yourself before you start building this business. Because if you don't get clear on that, then like at some point you're going to run into challenges, and you won't know how to make decisions. You're going to get doubts, and you won't know how to quit. Do I quit or do I continue? Those are the type of challenges that you run into. And when you get really clear on all these questions, then it's much easier for you to make decisions, and it gives clarity. It gives a sense of peace, almost, just kind of knowing what you're going after, and kind of knowing what you're building, and the clarity that it gives you. So highly recommend. If you haven't listened to this podcast, episode 487, free workshop to scale your Airbnb business. And if you don't want to listen to the podcast, if you just want to go straight to the training, then that's possible too. You just go to overnightsuccess.io/workshop, and you'll see. You just put in your name, your email, and then you can get free access. The training also comes with like worksheets and stuff that you can keep, so you can do this exercise again in a year from now. Because you know what, our lives change and our goals change, and what we want to do. When I started my Airbnb business in 2012, I wanted to have a very small business where I'm just traveling the world and having fun, and I don't need that much money. And now Eric and I are building like a business that we hope to pass on to our grandchildren in the future. So things can change. So that's why we created these sheets that you can download and keep using for the rest of your life, basically. So I thought that's pretty cool. All right, last but not least, in actionable tips, episode number 528, how to solve issues with your Airbnb guests by communicating effectively. So the reason I chose this episode as one of the three is Eric and I, as you guys know, like we are building this business free wild. We're in the very early stages, but eventually we want to have like 20 to 30, or maybe more communities, tiny home communities, or unique Airbnb communities in different places all around the world. Now we have our first property in Idlewild, California, and we have 4 cabins on this property, and this is new to me because I've never had one property with like multiple units. And so one issue that we ran into where I really didn't know how to handle it was when one of our guests in one of the cabins started annoying another guest in another cabin. Right? Usually when you have a guest issue, it's not as complicated, because it's basically, let's say one of your guests is making a lot of noise and the neighbors are complaining, right? Now the neighbors aren't your guests, right? So it's a different way of communication. So in that case, you just have to deal with that one guest. You just have to like get the guest to stop making noise, and then that's it, right? That's all you have to focus on. You just tell the neighbors like, hey, I'll take care of it. But when you have 2 guests, now it becomes a bit more complicated, because you're basically dealing with I guess a 2-dimensional customer service challenge. And so I wasn't sure how to deal with that. The challenge was that one of our guests had 2 dogs, and they started barking, and the guest actually left to go for dinner or visit family or something. And then our other guest started complaining about the noise. So Eric did a very good job of kind of creating a 5-step process of how do we deal with these type of challenges. And I think you can use that process also for if you have a challenge with just one guest. So but because there's 2 guests involved, it required a little bit more like thinking of and strategy, and how do we communicate, when do we communicate, who's involved, so I guess it's a system that solves a customer service challenge that's very complicated, but you can also use it for simpler guest issues. So in this podcast, Eric kind of lays out the 5 steps that he came up with to solve this problem, and we also give a lot of details of like what the exact messages that were actually sent to the guests to solve this problem, and we ended up solving it in a very a good way. You know, we didn't get like when I when I get a message of a guest that's having an issue, like I don't know about you, but there's always like the moment where you're kind of like, oh, I don't want to deal with that. Like you kind of get a little anxiety or just a little feeling of disappointment or whatever it is. But the fact is that, you know, in this business, like issues, challenges with guests are always going to be there. That's part of the business. So we need to come up with a way to respond to that and not react to it. And what I mean by that is reacting is kind of instantly just going off of your emotions and dealing with it that way, versus responding is just taking a step back and just kind of thinking higher level of like, okay, you know, how do I respond as a leader? How do I respond in a way that my ego is not involved? And how can I be yeah, how can I respond in a way that's going to solve this challenge without stepping on any egos and without coming from an ego position ourselves? And you know, this process that Eric really mapped out, I think is really excellent, and so I'm really excited about that. So if you and you know anybody who's listening to this podcast, I can guarantee you you're going to run into an issue with a guest at some point. So figuring out how to communicate with them effectively is really important, because that's not only going to solve the issue, but it's also going to prevent bad reviews. Because we actually did not get any negative effects of this situation. We didn't get a bad review or anything. So if yeah, if that's interesting to you, episode 528, how to solve issues with your Airbnb guests by communicating effectively. Boom, that's it. Those are the most interesting podcasts that I would recommend to everybody who's listening, to maybe go back and listen to it again. If you haven't listened to it, go check it out. Yeah, that's it for today. So again, I hope you have a great year in 2023. I'm actually I'm actually flying back to Panama in about a week from now. So I'm gonna be in the Netherlands here for a little bit longer to meet up with some friends and just kind of experience the cold. In Panama, it's always really hot, so it's kind of nice to be in a cold climate to get some fresh air sometimes. So with that said, thank you for listening. I hope you have a great 2023. Appreciate you as a listener to the Get Paid for Your Pet podcast. And of course, on Monday, we'll be back with another episode. So have a great weekend and see you next time. Bye.